We're talking about it. Mom's making it. We're talking about substance abuse recovery. We're talking about senior living, healthcare. We have a great show. I'm Angie Graham, and we're talking about it. Sex and senior living. We're talking about it today. I am Angie Graham, and I am here with in-studio guests. We have Lori Narden, who is the Vice President of Regulatory Compliance. Welcome, Lori. And we have Stacy Sist, who is the Vice President of Nursing. Welcome, Stacy.
Thank you.
So this topic is not always something we all want to talk about because it can come with a lot of complicated situations for operators. So as well as for families, like you move your mom into assisted living, the last thing you want is a romance happening. But nowadays, with what do we have, Golden Bachelor going on? I mean, like our residents need any more ideas about romance, right?
And watch shows for the Golden Bachelor.
But the reality is sex is a very natural thing. And we don't often want to think about our elderly parents in that way. But the reality is
it happens.
It happens, right?
Sure
so
does.
Let's start with navigating through assisted care residents, most of which are cognitive. So let's start there. And some which may be activated or not activated, correct?
Correct.
So Lori is our compliance guru. So if you get the call that a resident, there's a little romance going on in-house and residents may be holding hands and showing affection to each other, what happens next, Lori?
Well, typically what we'll do is the Ombudsman Office has put out some questions and we will ask the directors to sit down with each of those residents and kind of have that discussion with them, asking these questions to make sure that they truly understand the relationship and things like that is occurring and whether or not it's consensual on both parts. It gets very confusing and difficult when you do have somebody, though, who obviously is activated. But just because you're activated does not mean that you then lose that, ability to make that decision related to sex. And so sometimes it's very difficult for our families more so and our team members than it is for our residents.
And sometimes residents say it's none of your business.
Exactly. Yeah. And we've seen the whole gamut of, things from having, residents who have said, that I was never faithful to my wife. So why would I start now to, I only want to be faithful to my wife. So please remind me if, I'm starting to get into a relationship with another female that this is not my wife. So you just kind of have to leave it up to each of those residents to decide that.
Or a memory care where they think that resident is their previous or their spouse who's now passed away. I think that's one of the more difficult ones is because they truly think that resident that's not their spouse. And the families can get pretty upset about the situation, well, understandably so. But we've had some difficulty navigating those things. And like you said, the ombudsman and putting out those questionnaires and sitting down with the residents separately. And
it can be a really tough place to be as an executive director or a provider because residents have rights. And there's also, we've been in cases where the resident said, I don't want my daughter or my son or my family to know. This is none of their business. It's my business. And then when the family finds out, they're like, well, why didn't you tell me? Or there's the other extremes of, I don't want my mom holding hands with anyone and make her stop. And that's not always the case either.
Right.
We're not there to
police the situation. I think that's, yes, we're taking care of them, but we're doing it in a way that protects their rights and their wants. And we've had family members, I don't want my mom to have a relationship with that male resident, but the mother, her behaviors decreased substantially. She was much happier having this companionship. So we could see the benefit of that companionship. The family was not on board with it.
Especially if there's a spouse.
Yes.
That's really difficult.
Oh, yeah.
In the memory cares. I mean, as a family member, my dad being in a memory care and going in and seeing him and my mom had been married 47 years. And there was another resident in the unit and her husband would come in to visit. Well, my dad started holding hands with another resident in there and they would walk around the unit and they would hold hands. And then my mom would sit there with that resident's husband. That was just really difficult for her and I'm sure him as well. And even though it's just hand holding, that's still your spouse.
Yeah, you're still married to that person.
And
yeah,
the disease is so, it takes so much from somebody and it's not really that person, it's the disease at that point.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad, when he was in his memory loss, before he even went to the memory care unit, my mom still had him at home and she was out in the kitchen cooking and I'm sitting in the living room with him and he leaned over and he said to me, "Your mom's going to be really mad." And I was like, "Why?" And he goes, "That lady out in the kitchen's been driving her car." And that was my mom. So dementia plays, it's different for everyone.
Right.
And you don't know what that person's experience is going to be. But that was definitely difficult for our family, seeing that change. And at the time, I didn't have as much knowledge about it as I do now. But seeing our families go through that same thing I think the reminder to the audience is it's not the person, it's the disease that takes over with those.
Absolutely. That's not the person who they were, who you married. That dementia takes everything eventually. And that's why, like, when you see it from the outside looking in and it is giving those residents perhaps with dementia some comfort or peace, you want to not encourage it, but allow it to happen. I mean, dementia's taken everything from them. We don't want to make the situation even harder and, you can't be next to that person and try to separate them or, it has its benefits, physical touch and there are benefits to that. We grow up, we look for a mate. We spend the majority of our life with somebody, and then we're just expected to be like,
nature.
Yep, I'm old now. I don't need it anymore. Well, that's not the case. That is a lifelong need that doesn't go away just because we age. So.
Right. And it's the connection too. I mean, and
absolutely.
And studies show that, that connection reduces, depression. It reduces cardiovascular disease, all of that physical touch is so important. And it's, to be just, you go into assisted living and just expect to drop all of that, is just, it's rough and it's difficult.
And it's an area of the assessment that I mean, do you go into your doctor's office and they ask you detailed, about your sex history? No, it's uncomfortable. So in assisted living, when you're doing an assessment on somebody, are you going to start digging into No. I mean, eventually, this topic is coming up more and more in the last several years. We've had more and more situations where it's come up or we've had to navigate it. Definitely took me by, 20 years in, and this is the most it's come up in 20 years for sure. So it's something that upon assessment, we're going to have to just get comfortable with those uncomfortable questions and conversations.
And also with dementia, part of that journey for some individuals can be a accelerated, all of a sudden they start exhibiting sexual behaviors, whether they're trying to touch or they're trying to, and both sides, either women or men. And that's why it's hard for me sometimes when we're talking about things and we'll just say sexual behaviors, like it's a devious thing, but it's really a very natural thing. The problem is that they may be touching team members or touching other residents that aren't welcome to that touch.
Right.
But it's the disease again. They're having those feelings. So when that starts to happen from a nursing standpoint, what are some of the things that we do or we put in place for residents that may start to exhibit
It really starts with the
wanting
assessment.
to touch or
It really starts with the assessment. Why are they exhibiting these behaviors? So in dementia, behaviors are usually expressing a need of some sort. So trying to ascertain what need is this resident trying to express through this behavior, getting to that root cause, that's how we can successfully intervene if it's a potentially a disruptive behavior. And there's a lot of things we can do. A lot of residents with dementia will see a team member or a caregiver as their spouse. They think it's their spouse. And that's where, you know, redirection, sometimes just flat out ignoring the comments and just moving on and, you know, performing the care that needs to be provided. What else do we do?
we notify the physician.
For sure.
And
Rule
then-
out infection. What type of dementia is this? Is this, you know,
There may be some
or
medication
For sure.
recommendations and some changes to get through that.
It was really educating our team, our team members. Sometimes this is their first experience in healthcare and they're younger, and it's providing that education that it's not a deviant behavior. It's
a normal human instinct, really,
Yeah. And
that
it's just
individuals can have.
Yeah, and it's educating the team members that this isn't something to shame our residents about. It's not. It can be openly discussed. It's okay to discuss this. We just have to have a plan in place. There's interventions that we can try, but while respecting their rights in the process.
And we've seen it with both men and women. We've had women that might be going into a man's room. They pick out a man that's there, and even though they may be nonverbal, but for some reason they think that that's
Their husband,
someone they're in their husband, someone they're in a relationship with, and then they're down in someone's room regularly. And as soon as you get them redirected, they're back there.
Yeah.
So oftentimes everybody just assumes it's a man, and it's not always the
no.
case.
Oh, yeah, no.
The
Some of our
disease does
residents-
not discriminate.
No.
It's both men and women.
And some of our residents really like our maintenance men.
And our male caregivers.
Yes, they're
make
happy when some of our maintenance men come to visit, for sure.
They make inappropriate comments too.
Yeah, oh,
Our
yes.
ladies can.
They sure can.
And they might or might not invite company to come to their room.
Yep.
We have seen that.
Yes.
Because remember, the disease takes them back in time. They're a college student in their mind.
Yeah, they think they're
They're at the
20, 30,
fraternity.
or they're
They're at that fraternity party. They're like, ooh.
they're not 70 years old anymore. That's not how they see themselves, for sure.
Nope, they're back in time, and there's a good-looking guy, and they're not afraid there's a good-looking guy.
Nope.
And hey, will you come back to my room with me? Good for them, right? And we it's great to have these open conversations about these topics because no one really has them. And I think as the aging population, we're getting into a population where sex is part of their desire. I don't even want to call it behavior. It's just that desired part of the lifestyle they want to be able to maintain
Well, it's not as
as long as they
taboo.
can.
In the generation before them, you're looking at baby boomers, the sexual revolution, Woodstock. So this generation has grown up where it's not off the table anymore. It's something that we can talk about and have open conversations about. So just because they're aging doesn't mean you stop talking about it. It's
Right. And really, when you think about it, like when I first started in assisted living, it was like every time there was anybody holding hands or anything, we've got to stop that. We automatically notify the families and things like that. And now it's kind of, and you really just, it was like taboo and just, you didn't really talk about it. And even growing up, we just didn't talk about sex, even though, I lived through those 70s, it still wasn't something that was
Your
talked
parents
about.
were comfortable talking about.
Well,
No.
exactly. And so now it's like as we've aged and these generations grow up, I mean, it's much more freedom to start talking about those, sexual relationships and things like that. And so, yeah, we are going to see more of it. You're also going to see more of, the homosexual, LGBTQ stuff, coming in and things like that. Because, we used to not think, a woman climbed into another woman's bed. Okay. She just climbed into the wrong bed. But if a man climbed into a woman's bed, it was, oh my God, we've got to do something. We got to care plan this. We've got to take care of this. And it's, now you have to kind of start thinking about all of those things and that kind of that mind shift of, we have to be a little bit more open to this stuff. And
we have residents coming in now with assistive devices or the PRN for the little blue pill.
Yep.
Yes.
And they want to have privacy.
Yes.
And absolutely, it's their right. So as
and we've had to work around that with the assistive devices, which can be challenging in the memory care settings.
Absolutely. Finding devices in rooms.
But it's a resident right.
It's a resident right. Cleaning devices because of prevention of infection, because they have confusion or memory issues. So you're taking care of the whole person, right? Head to toe, whole person, all aspects. It's holistic care. So it's, once again, it goes back to educating our team members that this is part of our job. This is what we do. This is what we signed up for. And if that's what that involves, that's what that involves.
And this is going to continue to just be more and more
Well, the frequency in the last couple of years alone is just like at least a couple of times a month. I'm getting an email, phone call, this is the situation. What do we do? But 5 years ago when it was pretty rare. So I expect this to be
bigger,
more frequent situation.
More things are going to come up. And that's how we often start. It's just when things come up and we learn and we navigate through it. So let's talk about some of the complexities for providers in regards to this. So, and we're speaking from the state of Wisconsin. Regulatory wise, Lori, how is a resident able to consent, or what does that look like, a resident being able to consent to a relationship with somebody else as they're living within a healthcare setting?
Well, and that's the state itself has even kind of switched all of that stuff too, with the ombudsman's now really getting involved with, resident rights and promoting resident rights. And so the state has kind of done that switch too, whereas, we used to have, if there was issues, like the family would call the state, they'd come in, investigate, and we usually get cited, for something like not notifying the POA, timely or something like that. And now it's more of looking at, as I said, those questions by the ombudsman and whether or not the resident is truly has the ability to make that decision and understand what they're involved. And the state, I think, is probably, citing things less because of that fact of they're looking at things like, you shouldn't be notifying the POA. You should not be, you should be asking that resident if you want us to notify the POA. And if they say no, we don't notify the POA. And it's scary when state comes in because you're kind of like, ooh, we're doing what the ombudsman told us we're doing, everything. Are we doing it right? And that's, that's kind of a scary thing for probably most providers because, we are required to notify them on everything and families on everything. And so now you've got this situation that is such a rights issue that we're not supposed to. And it makes you kind of start to think about the other things, that, if a resident says, I don't want my POA to notify this, or be notified of this because
don't tell my daughter.
But even on other things, because I want to smoke or I want to, drink or something like that. Like, it's kind of that fine line of, you've got to really start looking at those things and what's really going to be, the best interest. And
if a resident's in memory care, dementia care, and they're nonverbal, can they consent?
Yes, they can.
They can consent by behavior, or
Yes.
how does the state look at that? So if we got a woman, like, let's use this as a scenario because I know we've had this before, and she's continuing to approach the man, sit with the man, hold his hands, go to his room. How would the state look at that scenario?
They would look at what, how did you try to get, because as I said, you have to ask those questions and try to figure out those questions. And you've got to really delve into each resident based off of, if they're nonverbal, how are they communicating this to us? And even if they get into that whole sexual relationship where they're actually having sex, you have to look at things of is she showing signs of, not wanting to participate? Is she, or is she showing signs she is? And so, but part of it is understanding on whether or not people are going to talk and things like that, about one of the questions has to do with, do you understand the risks of this, which is not just the risks of getting a sexually transmitted disease, which is a whole other thing in, assisted living. But, the risks of you're living in a group environment now and everybody's going to talk, there's gossip, and we all know assisted livings are full of gossip.
Never.
Never. And so they're all going to be talking about it. And, do you understand the ramifications of that? And those are hard with people who are nonverbal, to try to get the answers to those questions. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't interested in that sexual relationship, because they wouldn't be continuing to pursue that if they weren't interested in that relationship.
We're Talking About It is brought to you by Our House Senior Living. Visit us at ourhouseseniorliving.com.
And no two situations are the same. This is not a black and white issue. We've dealt with several different issues, and I don't think one situation has been the same.
No.
There's so many factors that play into sexual relationships or companionship relationships between residents in assisted living or memory care.
Yeah, exactly.
They have never
Everybody
been the
is
same.
so different, because it's kind of you've got that person who said, I was never faithful, to the person that I've always been faithful. And even the person who's always been faithful, it doesn't necessarily mean that maybe this time they didn't
They will be. Yeah.
want to be, because they found somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting dynamics, because you have to look at every situation differently and
And with a completely open mind on every single situation.
And human behavior can be complex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's all the complexities that go with it. Staff that find 2 residents in the state of undress or
heavens.
partial undress,
they freak out.
they totally freak out.
Yeah. And it's just, yeah. But then there's an assumption too, or judgments being made. So I
Yes.
think it's just always reminding ourselves, we're here to care and not pass judgment or assume anything. Easier said than done, I'm sure. When I can't imagine, or walking into a room and witnessing some of the things that have happened, but it happens.
But residents have a right to privacy. Residents have a right to choose. And we've been in the situation where residents are choosing. That's what they are choosing.
Yeah.
We've also been in situations where we've had gentlemen that maybe have more than one girlfriend at the
Yep.
same location.
Yes.
And we've got 2 women that are fighting over the same man.
Oh, yes.
So these things are real life things that can happen. And
Yeah, so all those dramatic things that happen in real
just like
life
the
still
soap opera.
happen. They still happen when you come to assisted living. They don't go away.
Yep.
the one resident is jealous of the other one, and he's in with her, and he's sitting with her, and he should be sitting with me, and all things that we have no control over.
Exactly.
And so it can get very interesting.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and I think the biggest issue we usually have is the families and the team members. I mean, they're really families, because they think they get to make that decision when they don't, and the team members who are just appalled by the fact that somebody who's elderly still has sexual desires. I mean, I'm like, you go. I mean, come on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I hope that's me when
Right. So let's change it up a little bit and let's talk about another topic that is there was this article written February 22nd of 2024, and it was an article in regard to sex offenders. Now, this is a whole nother topic. How do we navigate the worlds of registered sex offenders in healthcare settings? This particular article talked about specifically nursing homes. So this was in regards to nursing homes, and it says at least 30 registered sex offenders live in Wisconsin nursing homes, records show. The media, they go right for the most shock value that they can get. So this is message to people is when they write these stories, they find the most awful story they can find, and then and these aren't things that we see happen a lot in our settings because we usually do not take in sex offenders. It's not something that we have. But Lori, you were talking that there are specific adult family homes that are available in the state for individuals.
Or CBRFs. They have.
That would be all men or all women.
Or people who have, sex offenders or who've been, in prison and things like that, so that they don't kind of bring them into the regular assisted living arena.
Right away, when I seen this article, my first thought in my mind was like, well, they could be bedbound on a feeding tube and be in a nursing home.
They could be
and
on
not
hospice.
Be a threat to anyone. They could be on hospice.
Yeah.
They could be. There's so many scenarios, and they want you to think that this person is roaming the hallways at night and
being allowed to there are so many situations or scenarios. This person could have had they needed a nursing home stay, skilled nursing care. When you're a nurse, you healthcare, you take care of anybody, regardless of race, religion, that's your job, right? We take care of people.
Yeah.
So they went to the hospital for an acute condition. They needed rehab. They went to a nursing home who was willing to take them and care for them. I don't think there's any maliciousness behind it.
You don't know if they've had a stroke and that, now they're in paralysis and.
Yeah, you have no idea. And how long ago did that happen? I don't know. You know what there's so many.
Well, right. And you still even see the ones where, they're on the sex offender list because they were maybe 22 and their girlfriend was 17 and, and so now they're on the list, but now they're also married and,
have kids.
It's
there's such a lack of background information there. How do you even make or even have an educated opinion? And
it goes on. It gives an account of what I think is a very isolated, unfortunate situation, and there was victims involved. And I'm not trying to minimize victims in any way. What I am trying to educate the public on is that these are not the norms of what really happens. These are extreme situations. And is it unfortunate that this happened? Absolutely. Is it something that happens regularly? Absolutely not. No. That's just not something that happens regularly out there in regards to sex offenders.
The number one goal of any skilled nursing facility, CBRF, is resident safety.
Absolutely.
Policies in place, procedures in place. It's all about resident safety. That's your number one goal. In nursing school, it's the NCLEX is a majority of resident safety patient safety questions. So the focus is always resident safety. That's not to say that unfortunate things happen. But it's a learning experience for sure. I'm sure that facility.
Yeah, and I'm sure there is going to be nursing homes or maybe even assisted livings that would consider admission of someone who was in hospice, no longer ambulatory. They're no longer a risk, end of life, and they may admit someone because there's no longer a risk. But most providers are going to weigh out that risk and determine if that's a fit or not a fit. We call that in our industry doing an assessment to determine whether individuals are a fit or not a fit. So just like you say, everyone needs care, whether they're a sex offender, whether they're, a murderer, whether they were all those people at the end of life.
Well,
they
prisons have
still
nurses.
need a dignified care for end of life, no matter how
there's prison
horrible their
systems.
past may be.
Yeah, there's prison systems that have a whole nursing staff. Because they're in prison, but they still need health care. It's across the board.
Absolutely. And there's so many providers that do a good job providing for the elderly across the board. So we have learned that seniors, yes, they still have sex. That happens. And even in assisted living, they want to be able to still have that right to do that, which means we're seeing more and more books written about this topic, more conversations out there that they want to maintain their sexual activity for as long as they can. And according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, STD rates in Americans aged 65 and older have increased as much as 260% since 2008. And many of those people are nursing home residents.
Because they don't think they have to use protection because they can't get pregnant. You still need to have protection. There are still diseases you can contract.
You may not know what your grandma and grandpa are out there doing, but the studies say they're out there doing something.
Yes, they are.
And they're keeping life interesting all the way through the golden years, just like we now see the Golden Bachelor. Has anybody started doing any of those watching marathons of the Golden Bachelor? I've not watched it at all.
I haven't
I've
watched
only
it yet
seen
either.
1 or 2 episodes of the Golden Bachelorette, the one that's just
Is that
coming
the one
out.
that's happening right now?
Yeah,
It's last time it was a man, right? It was the Golden Bachelor.
yes.
And
Now
it was a bunch of women, 60. How old were they? 60 and over? Or
I don't know the exact age. I'm not 100% sure.
fighting over
A man.
Yeah, we see that in our
Yep,
settings.
yep. Yes, we do.
And now it's the woman's turn. So we have a bachelorette with her senior bachelors.
It's interesting. The questions or the relationship goals or desires are
I know there's some
different.
watch parties going on. The next thing we're going to hear is, they're going to want to do speed dating in the dining room. It's going to be on the activity calendar.
Might be a good icebreaker
we need to get
to
more
know
men.
them to know each other.
Yeah, you could do that as an icebreaker. Yeah.
Yeah, for when a new resident comes in, you could do that. Right?
I don't think we should call it speed dating.
No, we could come up with another. Yeah,
Not speed dating.
not speed dating. No.
We'd have to come up with something else as far as that went. Well, it's been fun, ladies. Sex and senior living. We talked about it. So join us next time. And until then, we talked about it. Thank you.
You can find the We're Talking About It podcast on YouTube, YouTube Music, Spotify, Amazon Music, and don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe.